Your Public Works Gang Reduction Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues Rodriguez and Rue, and want us to get started. Now, due to an issue with the notification recommendation for 5, I'm going to ask that we continue item 5 because we need to deal with the notification requirements. So no objection to that. And I'm going to ask that we do item 4 on consent, but I need to deal with, we have one multiple comment speaker who included number 4 as one of his items, so can't move forward with that yet. So why don't we just handle that first. Mr. Herman, you have 3 minutes, or total 2 minutes to speak on these items and general public comment. Mr. Herman, 2 minutes, 3. So 2 minutes for the items and 1 minute for general public comment. In fact, why don't we just do your 2 minutes for the items and we'll do general public comment at the end. So 2 minutes for the various items.
Someone choked on the carne asada out there. So now that we're on item 1, cooling and urban heat impacts. Well, you heard that bullshit presentation by Mitch Englander yesterday during Council Chambers presentation. So full of hot gas asshole. The same as that Nuri Martinez, who's not here, and Joe Busquiano regarding energy, cooling, and urban heat impacts. If you would fix the fucking infrastructure of what we need to make up the difference in the dividends of what you created by all this housing and development, then we wouldn't have a grid problem. Then you go to item 2, San Fernando groundwater, efforts of the Los Angeles ELIAT Innovation Corporation, which has a task force. And it goes to the Environmental Justice Committee. Who the fuck cares about them too? Then item 3 deals with Mr. Dawson, the NWA, and the indigenous participation in rainwater demonstration. Well, you don't need a fucking demonstration about water. You dig a trench, you fill it with rocks, and then you put sediment on top of that, and then you grow shit on top of that, and you create a well. That's how you save fucking groundwater. The same way the indigenous people who were here before all the white nigger Sicilians did it. So when you're going to do something, do it right. Listen to Mitch O'Farrell and the indigenous white niggers like me who come here to protest regarding the so-called issues of rainwater. And then item 4, Plum, dealing with the hillside construction. Stop the negative declarations and the war on hillsides.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we will move, as I was saying, on item 4. If there is no objection, I'd like to move that on consent. Seeing no objection, item 4 is moved on consent. That takes us to item number 1. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 1 into the record?
Item number 1 is a motion from Council Members Blumenfield and Buscaino relative to the formation of a committee on cooling and urban heat impacts. This one's also referred to the Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee.
Thank you so much. This is one, we're having record heat is the new norm here in Los Angeles, and we need to find ways to work on our climate change. Different departments have a role in decreasing the heat island effect. The motion asks departments to come together to report on their efforts to address this issue and learn more about what can be done. Before I invite Greg Spotz and Tim Tyson from Street Services, we have 3 public comment cards. The first one we have from former Assemblywoman and now with Tree People, Cindy Montanez. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Councilmember, Mr. Councilmember. I'm Cindy Montañez, CEO of Tree People, and I am here on behalf of Tree People to speak strongly in support of your motion, Mr. Chair, to address urban cooling in Los Angeles. More people die of extreme heat than every other natural disaster combined. Los Angeles is going to experience a spike in the number of extreme heat days. When you have a spike in extreme heat days where the days are 95 degrees or more, people die. So we know that at least 5% more deaths occur on those hot days than when the days are cooler. So we now have an opportunity to become world leaders, national leaders, and leaders in our own communities to be able to protect people from the impacts of extreme heat. We also know that urban heat is often an unrecognized driver of social equity or inequity in Los Angeles. Low-income communities of color are the ones that suffer the most. So we stand in strong support of the motion and urge an aye vote.
Thank you so much. Next, we have David Fink from Climate Resolve. David, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm David Fink, the Director of Policy with Climate Resolve, and we're here also strongly in support of this motion that would create a committee on cooling and urban heat impacts. As my friend Cindy Montañez said, in an average year, there are a greater number of mortalities attributed to heat than all other weather-related events combined, so it really is the greatest sort of public health-related weather threat. On top of that, there's a direct correlation between surface temperatures and ozone formation, so higher heat days contributes to poor air quality, and then as you all know, on very hot days, people run their air conditioning longer, which strains the power grid and exacerbates peak loads. The region is expected to get 3 to 5 degrees warmer. As we heard, the number of extreme heat days is going to increase. But the good news is there are things we can do. We've already done some really good things, but this motion will bring together a committee of experts who can craft a comprehensive approach that will really continue the leadership of this city on this issue. And just want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, Chairman, and we're looking forward to working together with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Herman, please do not shout out. Thank you very much. That's the second time you've shouted out, Mr. Herman. If you do that again, I'm going to ask you to leave. Did you hear me here, Mr. Herman? Thank you. Let it be known. 2 disruptions, third one, you're out. Next, Edna Robidas from the Trust for Public Land.
Hi, my name is Edna. I'm from the Trust for Public Land. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide comment. Angelenos already experience extreme heat every summer. The past 2 weeks are a harbinger of more intense and longer heat waves intensified by our lack of tree canopy cover, urban greening, and parks, and black pavement. We have the data and mapping tools, including the Trust for Public Land's Climate Smart Cities LA Decision Support Tool, showing us the hottest locations down to the parcel in the city of LA, while our friends at Climate Resolve have led the way to show the cooling value of cool roofs and cool pavement. We strongly support the cooling motion to codify the goals in the Mayor's Sustainability Plan and stand ready to assist the city in strategic greening investments to both cool off the land surface temperatures and bring the public health benefits of parks and urban greening to Angelenos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other cities, Melbourne, Australia, set a goal by 2030 to lower their temperature of 7 degrees Fahrenheit. It makes sense as a city that we can have those kind of goals as well. So we're going to have Greg Spotz, Tim Tyson from Street Services, along with Craig Tranby from DWP, Eugene Barrow from Building and Safety, can all come to the front or the front section, and we can just take you in order. So go ahead and get us started, state your name, and give us a progress report.
Thank you. I'm Greg Spotz, Assistant Director and Chief Sustainability Officer of the Los Angeles Bureau of Street Services. It's great to be here talking about this very important topic with you, and a lot of our partners are in this room, and some of them have already spoken. Just a little context, we expect LA to be hotter and drier because of climate change, and we're going to need to do something about it. We're probably going to need to do many different things about it, and each of them probably will have to be done at a pretty large scale in order to move the needle on the heat island effect. And the heat island effect is the fact that the urban city is usually about 10 degrees hotter than the surrounding countryside, and that's because the built environment we've created absorbs heat during the day and throws off that heat into the evening. It's really great to be able to share this with you that 5 years ago, Craig Tranby from DWP came to me. We'd worked together in a previous mayoral administration, and I had just moved to street services, and him and his colleague came to me and pitched me on cool pavement. And they thought I might be a sympathetic ear because we'd worked together on the climate plan. When was that? 2007? The climate plan that was published back then. And so it's actually taken 5 years of effort to get to this point where we can report to you that we are doing some cool pavement. But this idea came to us from DWP, which is really great. We then brought together some different partners, and Climate Resolve is one of them, and so is the Lawrence Berkeley Labs Heat Island Group. And so we had a research partner that's studying this issue. We had an environmental partner helping move us along. And early in the process, we found out that although there was a consensus among scientists and environmentalists that cool pavements could be part of the solution to mitigating the heat island effect, we couldn't find an example of a cool pavement treatment installed on a public street in California. Not even one. And so we thought Los Angeles could take the role that we've had many times in sustainability-related issues of being a leader, a pioneer, and perhaps creating a market for new products and services by demonstrating that this kind of thing is possible. California, or the city of LA did that with natural gas-fueled refuse trucks, and we did it again with natural gas-fueled motor sweepers. There's been many times where we've created markets for things that other people thought nobody wanted. And with our scale, we can often buy it at a scale that makes it viable. So we spent about 1.5 years trying to find a product that would meet our skid and slip tests for wet traction. And we finally found one called Guard Top Cool Seal that was being used in off-street parking and in asphalt playgrounds at schools. They made it in like 5 or 6 different colors, but the gray color turned out to reflect more of the sunlight and absorb less, and they started marketing the gray one as a cool seal. And we did a partnership with Recreation and Parks to have the vendor at their expense place 7,500 square feet of this at the Balboa Sports Complex. There was a newly paved parking lot there, and we had this coating installed on half of it so we could have the other half as a control. And we found it was typically about 10 degrees cooler, and that temperature difference grew throughout the day. And we thought that was significant. And it also did meet our wet traction specifications. And so we pursued funding for a small pilot, and the council and mayor funded that for fiscal year 16-17 for about $190,000. And then we set out to apply this coating on one city block in each of the 15 council districts. And we started with yours in CD3. And we've now done all of them except CD7. And we have an excellent partnership with General Services because they have an asphalt lab with a materials testing group, and they've actually developed a protocol to test these thermal performance claims rigorously rather than just pointing a gun at one area and pointing a thermal gun over here. They make 10 different spots and measure 10 places on the coated area and then 10 places over here on the uncoated pavement, and the average out those temperature readings to get a difference. And we're seeing about a 10-degree average difference in each of the 14 locations where we've placed the material. So it's a very early stage in doing this. We think we were the first jurisdiction in California to do it. Some researchers for the federal government have said you'd have to coat a third of the streets in a city to start reducing the temperature of the city. And with, 69,000 city blocks, that would be a whole lot of cool pavement. But it's a start, and it's one of a number of measures we could be taking, including cool roofs, which our friends will be sharing some information about that with you in a minute, and more shade trees. And I do want to mention about that the city of LA has been planting trees for many years. Most of the tree planting today is happening with city plants. Street Services is opening up locations and identifying them for city plants. We're also planting a number of trees that are related to the sidewalk reconstruction work and the sidewalk repair program, and we're planting trees for new streetscape projects like median islands and those kind of things. But I think there's an opportunity to talk about a strategic tree planting program specifically to mitigate the heat island effect, and one could focus on tree poor areas of the city, which often are underprivileged communities. So that's something we would love to collaborate with you, our council members, on in the future, and I think this working group, that could be an area that they could explore, as well as what a larger rollout of cool pavement might look like.
Great, thank you. As you know, I'm very excited about the cool pavement, the whole initiative, obviously, but the cool pavement in particular is sort of so unique. I've been out there myself to the one in my district with my little thermal gun and have tested it multiple times. But tell us, the temperature is clearly different on the street versus other streets. How does that affect the ambient air temperature? And ultimately, if we're trying to cool down the city or the valley, tell us how that works, because obviously the heat's being reflected. I describe it to people sort of as a sunscreen because it actually has zinc in it. But the heat's going somewhere, and where is it going, and how is it cooling us down?
It's actually a very complicated question that researchers are using computer modeling to try to better understand. There's the state of the research at present says that the cool roof probably reduces the temperature of a dwelling more so than adjacent cool pavement, but that adjacent cool pavement does affect the temperature of the dwelling. And maybe particularly in the late afternoon, early evening, when people come home from work on a weekday, if the pavement has absorbed all this heat all day and is now throwing off that heat right when people come home and want to air condition their house, it stands to reason that if the pavement started out cooler when you got home, there'd be less of that heat that needs to be dissipated. Some of the sun's energy is reflected right back up into the atmosphere. Some of it, if you have a more reflective surface, might bounce off onto adjacent dwellings. It's a complex question and something we'd love to perhaps find some outside research partners where maybe we could do a whole neighborhood in cool pavement and measure the temperature inside some of the dwellings, with some sort of research program. Maybe we could find someone who could write a grant for that, an outside research partner. So there's a lot more we still want to learn, but the early signs are favorable. And also, something very interesting is all the residents who come out and talk to us when we're doing this, they all believe the city's getting hotter. There's a consensus among Angelenos that something needs to be done. Everyone says to us, if it has any chance of making our block cooler, we want to try it. And I thought that was an interesting finding, too.
And the other thing I noticed, when you shoot your heat gun on the oil slick, as the street gets dirtier, its effectiveness goes down. And I guess that's why we're testing it over a period of time.
Yes, we are concerned about soiling of this light-colored material for two reasons. For the aesthetics, which the neighborhood needs to be comfortable with, and for the possibility that if it gets dirty, does that mean it's darker and therefore absorbing more of the heat? An important caveat is we don't know that this product is the exact right product to take to scale, but it was the first product we were able to find that met our specifications. One of the things we're noticing is the soiling depends a lot on what's on the adjacent streets that people drive on before they drive on the coated block. And so we're getting more soiling on certain kinds of streets where it's picking up what's there and then tracking it on than others. And in a phase 2, we would like to explore if we chose streets more carefully and perhaps did groups of streets together where you might have a whole area that was treated, maybe there would be less tracking onto it. So that's something we're looking into. It seems that, in summer, a recently slurry sealed street can become a little soft, and then your tires might pick up some of the rubber in that slurry and then drive it onto the coated area. So these are all things we're trying to learn more about.
We're going to go through all the different folks. So if there's any questions for Greg, and then we're going to have Tim and Craig, DWP, and we'll go through them as well, and then we can ask everyone at the end. But I don't want to, if any of my colleagues have particular questions for Greg.
No, I mean, we can wait. I just had one quick question, but
Sure.
do you want to wait?
Oh, go ahead, if you have a question for him.
I just wanted to know if the Bureau of Street Services had stats on the cool pavement in Arleta. Are you familiar with that?
You mean
I think
the
it's
one block
between-
that we installed there?
Yeah, it's between Beachy and Ragoon and Reliance, I think. It goes all
I
the way
have
to-
a report from GSD on the thermal performance of your block, and I'd love to send it to you.
Sure, I haven't seen it. That was my only question.
Happy to share it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Okay, great.
great. Tim?
First and foremost, trees cool the city. We would like to target low canopy covered areas, start planting more trees, bring the budget up to actually bring the division back to planting trees as well as nonprofits. And we need to keep planting trees. If they want to bring the city down to a cooler temperature, the trees transpire. That means water comes out of the leaves, and it keeps very cool underneath the tree. So if you have the cool pavement and you have everything working together hand in hand, I believe we can bring down the heat of the city better. And that was just about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, the tree technology's been out there for a long time.
It's
And,
the first and the foremost, right? So it's not something that anyone can deny.
Yeah. The tricky part is with our sidewalk policies and ripping up the sidewalks, how do we balance that, knowing the extreme benefits of having trees, but also what that does to our infrastructure.
Absolutely, and not to put anybody in fear, but we have different diseases out there that are taking out certain areas of trees where they've been uniformly planted, and they've been there many years. And with the sidewalk repair program, we're going in and bringing things up to new codes, new standards. And we're not going to leave these trees there due to the fact they're in a hazardous condition to begin with. So you don't do that. You have to remove these trees. We have to plant trees that grow, that have larger canopies to cover more of the city. So this is an actual good thing where we can go in and get rid of these hazardous trees that can also cause liability issues, and get newly planted trees that hopefully in the long run will be disease resistant and those kind of things and last a lot longer than the trees that were previously planted by other city foresters.
Great. Any particular questions for Tim before we move on to the other presenters? No? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Craig?
I'm Craig Tranby. I'm with the Department of Water and Power, Efficiency Solutions. I was just going to try to take a stab at elaborating on the question you had earlier about the reflection of heat. With the darker colors, like the gray colors, you can also get a benefit of what they call the infrared energy getting reflected as well. So that's kind of behind the scenes. You don't really see that happening, but the the guard top product has a formulation to help reflect that, as do a lot of the cool roofs, which I'll be talking about in a moment. So to outline what LADWP has done to date, we've worked in the cool roof area for a number of years now. And thanks so much for the comments, Greg. Greg's done all the heavy lifting in getting the pavement pilots off the ground. It's really wonderful what he's done. As for cool roofs, this is one of the other key components for cooling our environment. DWP, there are two parts, I would say, to the cool roof approach by the city. We have the rebates and the residential ordinance, which is something that comes under building and safety, who could not be here today. So on the rebate side, LADWP, we introduced our rebate in 2010. And that, for residential, you could apply for a rebate and get a certain amount of money back to get a cooler roof for your house. And that went along at a certain pace for a number of years. And then it became apparent that there was an opportunity to enact an ordinance because residential cool roofs are still exceedingly rare in the city. So the ordinance was enacted to mandate cool roofs under the new code for residential roof replacements as well as new roofs. So that was a unique feature of the code, and Building and Safety developed that along with us. The mandate is there, as well as something else unique. The rebate was not withdrawn by the utility. Usually utilities will pull back on an incentive when something becomes code. However, this was part of the strategy to implement an ordinance that might not otherwise be implemented, to enhance the rebate to support the code change. So that occurred, and so we have the rebate today. Basically, on the rebate side, about 1,100 rebates have been paid since the outset of rebates in 2010, covering about 4 million square feet and saving over 1 million kilowatt hours per year. On the ordinance side, which is newer, since 2015 is when the ordinance was fully in effect, we have about 9,000 permitted roofs, we estimate, and there's about 13 million square feet covered, saving about 1.8 million kilowatt hours per year. So that's all residential. Moving on to a lot of commercial buildings in the city, what about those? Cool roofs have become a standard practice for commercial buildings. The sort of the financial argument is stronger with them on the flat rooftops. There's less of an aesthetic issue as well. So it's much more common, and it's also in the state code, Title 24, under the prescriptive category. So we see them a lot more on the commercial side, and there wasn't viewed a need as much for an ordinance. Rather, we did put a higher rebate incentive in our custom performance program, the efficiency program for commercial buildings. So there is a rebate in there for those who go above and beyond the code requirement. Briefly, I just want to point out, and Greg had mentioned some of them as well, some of the partners that we work with. Lawrence Berkeley National Labs have been doing this research for over a decade now. They're just a fundamental partner on anything related to urban heat island. They've done so much research. They have so many experts there. Be it cool roofs, cool pavements, or trees, all of those things they have excellent research on. Also UCLA and USC locally, and we've used the research institutions to inform the programs and policies and calculations that we do in terms of energy savings and greenhouse gas reductions. Just briefly, Greg already talked about trees, but I'll just put in one more word about city plants. LADWP provides funding to city plants for trees that can shade buildings to reduce air conditioning use, so to save energy. So it's one of our energy savings programs. In that process, we've been planting through city plants about 20,000 trees a year, and over 16 years we've been doing trees as a utility. There's about 250,000 new trees have been added. The program does focus on low canopy areas. It's one of the goals of the program. Trees have many benefits beyond saving energy, so we advocate them in many ways. But in terms of your urban heat island, I think having those research partners sort of at the table would really help clarify the best strategies for including more trees to complete the cooling process. That's it for my comments. Thank you.
You mentioned a number of the great rebate programs that are helping us in this. Which ones are not being utilized enough at the moment or are undersubscribed?
Of all of our programs, there are probably individual items, like here's another cooling feature, something called a whole house fan. It's something that's not an air conditioner, but it basically pulls all of the hot air out of your house in the evening or early morning. That's a rebate we don't see a lot of uptake on for residences, but it's a substitute or an alternative to air conditioning, uses far less energy. So that's one example. Cool roofs used to be that example, but then the ordinance certainly boosted participation in that rebate program.
And then some of them, like the AC tune-up, which I pushed last year, and we were able to get, was so oversubscribed that we had to stop it.
Yes.
But we're now, as please reinforce, we're now getting it going again.
Correct. Yeah, I can't speak to all the details of that program. It's with someone else, but yes, they are getting ready for relaunch. I understand. And that was a hugely popular program, a program where we come out to a residence and install something with sort of no fuss, no muss would be the most popular program, an entirely free program. A program where we pay a part of the energy savings value and the customer has to do the rest is a little more work, and so we see less participation in those.
Right. One other small thing, but a number of constituents have asked me about creating a separate zone for the valley, which I guess we did years ago, but we can't do anymore. Are you familiar with that issue?
I'm not familiar with the new issue. I'm aware of the hotter zone in DWP where the tiered rates are charged differently. So you get a little bit of pricing relief in the hotter zone of the city.
All right, well, I'll save this question for someone else then down the road. But I tried to push an even hotter zone for basically the valley at this point, but basically found that we couldn't do that. I guess Prop 26 is preventing us from doing that. I wanted to put that out there because I still get a lot of requests on that. And
perhaps that could be a topic of the new committee.
Okay. Any additional questions for Craig before we move to our last presenter on this item? No? Okay, thank you. And then we have Eugene with Building and Safety. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Eugene Barbeau with Building and Safety. To continue on the residential ordinance, as it was mentioned, it was enacted and fully enforced as of January 2015. It applies to all new residential buildings, additions over 500 square feet, and it applies to alterations where greater than 50% of the roofing is being replaced. What the ordinance aims to do is to, again, use these cool roofs to cool down the homes, thereby reducing the energy required from an air conditioning unit. So the coolness factors, how we enforce whether or not it's a cool roof product or not, there's two main factors. It is the thermal emittance, and the solar reflectance. Using those two measures, and there are products listed on the Cool Roofs website in conjunction with DWP. We use those products to determine which ones qualify as a cool roof product or not. And again, all new buildings, additions, and alterations apply for residential buildings. I don't know if there's anything else. You have any questions? A lot of it was already said.
Do you have any stats about like the number of cool roofs installed so far? How much energy they've reduced, overall? How many people have actually taken advantage of it?
I don't have those numbers. We don't typically keep track of them, but I can, see if our permit generating system can pull together some numbers for you. I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay, maybe that can be part of the written report then to get those, to quantify some of this, because it's great stuff, but we're really going to move forward on it creatively. We need to quantify it. Great. Any additional questions? Mr. Herman, you're leaving, but you're now kicked out. Do not come back. Let the record reflect Mr. Herman has been kicked out for multiple warnings. Thank you. Any additional questions? No. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so recommendation here will be to approve the motion and to have a jointly written report submitted in 45 days by the departments that are represented here today, along with Planning and Rec and Parks, on the formation of a committee on cooling and urban heat island impacts to address the issues we discussed today and to move forward. Seeing no objection to that, it is so ordered. Thank you. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you on this issue. So now we'll move on to items 2 and 3. Mr. Espinosa, could you read both items into the record? And
items number 2 and 3 are both reports from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Number 2 is relative to approaches that may benefit the San Fernando groundwater aquifer remediation efforts and the Los Angeles A-Lot Innovation and Cooperation Task Force collaboration. Number 2 is relative to the participation in the rainwater demonstration projects, also in conjunction with the Los Angeles A-Lot Cooperation Task Force.
And just to set the stage, the Israel Los Angeles Task Force was basically, I put it together. I had done a bill on the state level to create a LA, California cooperative agreement, and wanted LA, when I came to be an LA council member, to be the first city to take advantage of that and try to have that force multiplier and use some of the innovation, particularly in the areas of energy and the environment, where we have similarities but also various different expertise, and to go along with that, the MOU. So two of the main issues that were dealt with on the task force so far had to do with both the remediation and the water conservation. So toward that end, the floor is yours. Marty.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Marty Adams. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at LA Department of Water and Power, and I'd like to briefly bring you up to speed on what's going on with these efforts. There's two motions, as was mentioned. The first I'll address is the one dealing with the stormwater capture. So this project actually was modeled after a project that schools in Israel had used, where they were actually capturing stormwater and treating it, holding it in vessels outside the school, and doing basic sedimentation treatment, and then using it for direct toilet flushing. So they're actually bringing in, it'd be almost like dual plumbing a building in Los Angeles, but they basically dual plumb the toilet fixtures at these schools in Israel, and they were able to catch quite a bit of water that got used for the flushing. So there is an arrangement to try to work with the Milken School, and there was a donor from the school who was looking to fund their effort on the school campus, and then we would coordinate with the school to work on this. So we did a number of visits to the school. We did a brief engineering study, determined between runoff in the school and also mining a local storm drain, that there's about 7 acre-feet of water a year that could be used for alternate uses that would basically offset potable water uses at the school. So that's about a $15,000 difference in the school's water bill if all that water is able to be captured year in and year out. So we looked at that and the technology that would be needed. At the time, there's a decent amount of construction that has to go with this, as well as monitoring. One of the things that's different from dual plumbing a building in California particularly is that there's a lot of regulatory oversight, and there'd be oversight from the county health department and others as to how to make sure there's no commingling of water, especially if you have one source of water that would flush the toilets when there's rainwater, but you might also not have rainwater, and so you'd also need to have plumbed potable water in so they would flush normally. So you have to make sure there's no chance of cross-connection or contamination. So there's a number of issues and hurdles. At the time, unfortunately, the principal was not ready to move ahead with that project. We continued to reach out to the school. We've told them that we're available for technical expertise and for guidance if they want to pursue that. It might be worthwhile looking for another school that would be interested in a similar project. And so it's not necessarily location centric. There's a lot of places could do it with whatever on-site capture they could do for stormwater. We also worked with the school on rain barrels and some erosion control technology for some of the runoff issues. And we did also work with the kids to try to give them some ideas of challenges in the water industry and places that they might work on their research projects and some of the endeavors that they were doing. So the good news is we have a good relationship with the school and the students. The downside is we haven't been able to get a project off the ground yet, but we are prepared to assist if they're still interested in doing that. I don't know if you have any questions about that particular project or motion.
Well, just that one, eager to see something on that front move forward, and I'm happy to work with you to talk to the principal and figure out, and the donor who was going to help with that. They need to either sort of fish or cut bait. Either they're going to be our pilot and they're going to be our partner and invest and test this technology, or we need to figure out another school or appropriate entity to partner with, because the technology down the road, if we can get this piloted, could save us a tremendous amount of water and could save Angelenos a tremendous amount of money. So I hate to, it bothers me that it's taken this long and that we don't have anything tangible to show for it. So I guess what I'll do is, one thing, have you report back to us on the progress on this, but then separately I'll work with you, because I didn't realize that, I thought more was happening on this.
And I agree. It's disappointing. This is one of the tough problems when we get off of city property and onto private property is how to move a project ahead when we can only go so far to get the property owner to move, and then they have to make the decisions on their own. We have a similar situation with LAUSD. We have a very close relationship. We have $45 million in water and power conservation and solar energy money out there. But it's difficult because the school has its own processes. They can't interrupt classes, and they have a certain amount of infrastructure and things that they also have to make sure that the students are safe during work. So it's a lot more challenging to work, particularly on school properties. If you were to reach out to the school, and we'll check with the principal again. I don't know the ins and outs of if the entire administration at the school was on board with the idea as the folks who brought it to them was. We're hoping that they would be. So, but we're more than more than ready to help in any way we can and to help move the project ahead. And if there's other schools that we might be able to do this at, another great opportunity might exist.
Right, because, well, they have to make an investment, and that's the hard part.
They had a donor, right, yeah.
They're also getting something. I mean, they're getting to be the pilot for LA and the expertise that you all are bringing to it, even though they have to bring some money to it, so.
So I agree. If we could find a way to move that ahead, it'd be nice. It is a game changer and a very different way of thinking and looking at how the facilities managed. So, but we need someone who's a willing guinea pig to move ahead with that. So,
right.
Okay. On the second motion dealt with groundwater treatment and making sure that we're optimizing our use of technology when it comes to treating groundwater. And so one of the things that started this, a company had surfaced that had in-situ groundwater treatment. So that's where you typically introduce some kind of bacteria or something that will actually treat pollutants in the water in the ground. And there's a number of efforts along these lines. Some are used in different parts of the world. The challenge of that particular technology becomes how do you treat a very large quantity of water in a very broadly spread area, and also how you might get that bacteria to grow not just where a well is, but also across the region. For us, the San Fernando Valley is one of the city's most significant water supplies. It has a very, very important role in the future. We're going to draw by 2025, a quarter of the city's water will come basically out of the San Fernando Valley aquifer. And so to do that, we need to regain the use of our aquifer, and that's going to require us to build several groundwater treatment plants. We will, in the process of this, build the world's largest groundwater treatment complex. And in conjunction with that, we'll also have two of the polluting groups that have been identified by EPA working together with us to improve their own treatment at their own sites for more remediation. There are a number of technologies being tested right now. One of the challenges becomes the timing for approval for technologies for treatment. Right now, they're called best available technologies, the ones that we're allowed to use by the health department. That list gets added to. There are technologies that actually are being tested for additional uses besides what they're currently allowed for. So we do have projects going on. And the list, just to highlight a few things, we have a biota two-stage treatment. Right now, bacteria are being used effectively to eat perchlorate and mostly perchlorate and chrome-6 in a vessel. And there's a chance to use that bacteria to also take out the volatile organic compounds. And so that's being tested by us. There's a testing of a treatment process called microvy, using a specialized treatment, a little treatment ball that's being tested in Pasadena. We're working closely with Pasadena on that to see how that comes out. We're working on also different kind of bed reactors and different ways to volatilize things such as 1,4-dioxane, which would be the biggest component that's a challenge for us in the San Fernando Valley, although luckily it's very localized. We use granular activated carbon, which is the aquarium charcoal that you see in a pool filter, but it's very high grade. A handful of that material has more surface area than a football field. And those small pores are what collect small particles of contaminants, and so we're working on highly engineered GAC as another method. And we're also working on soil aquifer treatment, and we do have one test going on right now in particular where we're using soil from the San Fernando Valley, recharging water from the Tillman treatment plant through it to look at the effectiveness of the natural soil bacteria, removing any kind of contaminants in that water, because we're going to use water from the Tillman plant to recharge the San Fernando groundwater basin. If we follow the Orange County model, we'll be creating very expensive water by doing all the way through a reverse osmosis treatment. We're hoping that we can prove that the ground can treat to that level, and that very expensive reverse osmosis treatment is not necessary. So that's going on right now, and that top layer of soil is called the Schmutz deck, where you get a lot of bacterial action. It seems to be effective, and so that may save the city a significant amount of money in creating additional water resources that go into San Fernando Valley aquifer. But we do have a number of efforts going on in the technology arena. Matter of fact, we received an award as one of the leading utilities of the world this March, recognized with several other utilities around the world for our work in innovation. We've been dealing with both the California-Israel Technology Workshop last June here. I have a team right now at WATEC in Tel Aviv that's working with the Israeli trade delegation and also a number of firms that are launching new technologies. We actually have had contact with firms from 13 countries looking at 50 different products that we think may have potential for use in the water system. And so one of the things we're doing is looking at technologies that are being used around the world so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And so we're engaged with Singapore, Budapest, we're engaged with other United States utilities, utilities in France and Israel, and there's people that are doing very highly highly technical, there's a word there somewhere this afternoon, very highly technical approaches to water treatment and even such things as pipeline repair and other water monitoring efforts that we're trying to adopt here. And so we actually have a number of projects in the works, including things such as bacterial monitoring at a fast scale, faster than anything's ever been done that we've seen in the world, and a product from France is floating outside our filter plant right now. So we are engaged actively. There's probably 200 to 300 companies out of Israel probably leading the charge on a lot of water technologies and a lot of water treatments. The challenge for many of the things in the water treatment arena is the scale that we deal in, because we're dealing with so much water, and a lot of cleanup projects that we see are much smaller than anything that we'd ever be able to look at, and so it's going to be a combination of technologies that have to be proven, be allowed by the health department, but we continue to have open minds and open arms to anything that might help us out to do a better job and also to save our ratepayers money.
Great. Well, appreciate that you're doing that, and that WATEC convention I went a couple of years ago. It's amazing all the technologies that are there. So in the last couple of years, have we made quantum leaps in the aquifer cleanup in the San Fernando Valley, or are we still in the same basic technological?
It's a great question, because I get a question a lot because everyone's waiting to see the shovel go in the ground for us to start. There's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work. A lot of the work goes into what's called a 97005 study, and this is a study required by the health department that looks at what contaminants might be in what they call a capture zone. And so we want to make sure we know the worst-case contaminants that we might be facing, both in terms of what they are and the quantities. That's been a big focus of the work. There is a lot of pre-design work for the largest groundwater treatment plant, the largest component, and we expect to go to bid or go on the street actually for an RFP for a design-build contract for that in the relatively near future. The goal is to have that up and running in 2021. And we need to actually have it by July 1st, 2021 in order to qualify for Prop 1 funding, because we have an application in for $300 million under Prop 1 for that. We have an environmental impact report out on another smaller plant in North Hollywood West. It's a 1,4-dioxane plume. These are we're looking at technologies that both exist and that are evolving. The hardest part is that to do a new technology, it has to go through bench scale studies, which is basically a scientific bench, then do pilot studies, and then be able to be designed into practice. So things that are cutting edge at this point, just entering the market, may not be able to be used. Things that have been developed for the last several years are certainly probably viable to be considered. And again, the issue will be if it can be scaled up to the quantity of flows that we're looking at, because we look at groundwater treatment plants around the world and things that come up and they all look exciting, and then we realize that there's such a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of water that we're dealing with in Los Angeles, especially if the groundwater is going to be 25% of our water supply. So the scale up is a challenge, but we work directly with vendors, we work directly with trade delegations, and we're really looking to find out what's the best, most reliable, and approved technology out there.
You went by that very quickly. We have a $300 million potential RFP out there for the
It's actually
money.
larger than that. The project, or suite of projects could cost $500 to $600 million. We've put in for a $300 million and change grant from the state under Prop 1, so we had to do that initially up front. We'd like to hope that we don't qualify because we only get a 50-50. So if the project's cheaper, then it saves everybody money. But that's kind of the outside mark. A lot of that depends on what happens with Honeywell and Lockheed that are building groundwater treatment plants in cooperation with us, and Honeywell's ability to cut off a Chrome 6 plume will be key to us also saving money for our ratepayers. And so we have great cooperation with them and EPA working collectively on this solution. The water can be perfectly cleaned up. We just need to have the facilities built to do that so we can regain the use of the aquifer.
Colleagues, question? Oh, great. Wonderful. So we'll waive them out of, well, for right now, we're going to note and file the report, have you report back as we discussed on, progress report down the road on the not the groundwater, the school project, and keep us up to date on.
We'll push on the school and see if they're ready to move ahead, so it'll be great.
Great.
Good.
Without objection, so ordered. Thank you very much. And I believe, Mr. Espinosa, that takes us, 4 was done on consent, and 5 was, we had to continue. We had 1 general public comment card from Mr. Herman, but he has been removed from the meeting. So there is seeing no additional public comment cards, no additional comments or questions from my colleagues. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.